Welcome to KR Films Entertainment Channel. Today I am going to explain a 2023 Bollywood movie called Mrs. Chatterjee vs Norway. The story begins in Stavanger, Norway as three women clad in official wear rush out of a house on a serene street of a Norwegian neighborhood, forcing an infant with them into their car. A seemingly domesticated Mrs. Chatterjee follows, bolting towards them. She dashes to block the way and sprints to the window, banging recklessly on the glass as the car starts moving with the howling baby inside. The woman clings onto the ceiling of the moving car but slips off to the ground on her face, rolling over to the edge of the road. Crying out a name such as, she picks herself up to run at a gallop behind the car once again for as far as she can, until she falls to the ground, succumbing to multiple injuries. The story takes a 24-hour leap back to the early hours of the morning. Rebecca in her kitchen jumps on to start with the routine household chores, playfully singing to her children, whereas Annie Red packs up for the day's hassle at work as the familial bliss diffuses throughout the household. We see Rebecca at her hospitable best, serving cups full of hot piping tea to the inspection officers from Wilfred. The couple invites the officers for breakfast while Rebecca pours in milk and kneads with her clenched fists a batter to feed her 3-year-old Shop. As she hand feeds her boy, the officers exchange glances with each other, reeking of disapproval, which does not go unnoticed by Annie Red, who, in order to pacify the officers, calls Rebecca out to use a spoon instead, but to his disappointment Rebecca shrugs the advice off naively. Moments later, Annie Red races to the door to leave for work in a hurry, with Rebecca following him to the car with his lunch, seeming annoyed with the routine inspections, and tries to express herself to her husband, who drives away unbothered. As she sees off the officers to the doorstep, they inform her about their upcoming inspection-aimed visit, where a senior officer from Oslo would accompany them. The visit, which is meant to be the final review, the same morning on the way to Shub's school. As Rebecca strolls such as pram along with one hand and holds on to Shub with the other one, she recalls having forgotten Chub's school project, the Tree of Life, which she had designed delicately using rice crop back home. Just when they enter the premises of the kindergarten, the teacher rebukes an apologetic Rebecca and takes her forgetful mistake for her disinterest in the curricular activities aimed at her child's quality learning. Rebecca disconsolately lets go of her son's hand while applying a coal mark on his forehead, which according to Indian mythology ensures to ward off evil eye. A gesture looked upon condescendingly and with suspicion by the onlookers and school staff. The very next day is scheduled. The Wilfred officers visit the Chatterjees, who welcome them. In officer Matilda inquires about such eyes vaccination that was supposed to be done the same day, to which Rebecca informs her that it went smoothly. However, she had to use arnica, an Indian homeopathic medicine, as a prophylactic against fever. As the team is seated, Annie Red instructs Rebecca to prepare and serve the guests with tea, to which he gladly responds. While she does so, the officer begins with mentioning how they prioritize the children's best interests, and go on to have a few questions with Annie Rudd, where they commence by stating how Anirban has had an insignificant contribution towards the domestic responsibilities, and that they disprove the unequal division of conjugal roles that they have witnessed inside the family. A baffled Anirban makes an attempt to clarify his stance, where he speaks of how he has undertaken the responsibility of the breadwinner for the family, whereas his wife takes care of the household duties, and that according to their culture has always been the appropriate division of labor in a functional family. As Rebecca joins, Anirban walks away, excusing himself. The officer offers to carry sachet so that Rebecca could request her husband to join them. As Rebecca enters the room, she is made aware of the conversation Anirban had to make with the officers. He expresses his disregards towards how insensitively Rebecca had opened up about his lack of role in household chores. Anirban picks a quarrel with Rebecca just when she looks at the officers vacating the house with such eye in their arms. The couple flees down the stairway in an attempt to catch pace with the car, leaving with their months-old daughter inside. Rebecca dashes to block the way and sprints to the window, banging recklessly on the glass window as the car starts moving with the howling baby inside. She clings onto the ceiling of the moving car, however slips off to the ground onto her face. Rolling over to the edge of the road, crying out Suchi's name, she picks herself up to run at a gallop behind the car once again for as far as she can, until she falls to the ground, succumbing to multiple injuries. In the meantime, Anirban dashes with his car, seating his wife inside, and they make their way to Shub's school, where the officers had managed to reach before them. As the destitute parents wreak havoc outside the blocked main gates of the kindergarten, the officers managed to take their child away right in front of their eyes. Unwell Rebecca, as soon as she gains consciousness, engages in a conversation with the Wilfred's official translator, who informs the Chatterjees that post a 10-week-long evaluation, they have arrived at the conclusion that the Chatterjees have been negligent and unable to look after their children, due to which the children's custody shall rest with the state till the date for committee hearing. While Anurag discusses the provision of a state-funded lawyer for his case, Debika flees of the Wilfred's office intending to meet her children, where she is made aware of how the children have been kept in a confidential care. The low-spirited mother protests and howls at the authorities, but finally gauges how it would all go when defeated. She kneels down to sit at the roadside. Soon Anurat in his car arrives and orders her to get into it. The couple, in utter distress on their way back, squabbles and falls out. Annie Red blames and accuses Debika as the sole cause for them landing in such a circumstance. The following morning, Annie wrote consolingly informs Debika that he would try to clarify the misunderstandings that became ground for the Child Welfare Services of Norway to take their children under the state's custody. A distressed Debika over a phone call rants to her family about how the Wilfred had claimed that their family is dysfunctional and the domestic situation is not conducive for the two children. She goes on to discredit Anirudh's choice of opting for a state-funded lawyer instead of sharing one privately, and how his citizenship has become a primary concern for him in this state of condition. The following day, the Chatterjees meet Sunil Kapoor, their lawyer, who assures that they will be able to win back the children. However, after that they might have to settle down in another European state or leave for India altogether, otherwise the Wilfred would continue to hawk over them for the rest of their lives. 3 days later, as the children get permitted to meeting their parents inside the vicinity of Wilfred, the joyous parents cheer contentedly at the sight of the two young ones. The bliss radiates through the eyes of the parents as the gleeful children run into their arms. However, the officials express how shedding tears would negatively impact the children's psyche, and the demonstration of such a familial bond might hamper the kids' ability to intermix in their foster home. It restrained the desolated Chatterjees from prolonging the meeting any further. As 2 weeks pass by, the committee meeting is called, where the Chatterjees' lawyer Sunil Kapoor advocates how Wilfred, on the grounds of cultural differences, have wronged the charities. He goes on to explain how hand feeding and coal application are both a tradition in the couple's homeland, and reinstates how diversity enriches a society, and not breaks it apart. His argument begins to gain momentum. He emphasizes that breaking up a normal family to put children under foster care will only lead to maladjusted, restless children and livid parents, and therefore Section 4 will not be applicable the case. The Conciliation Board therefore announces the interim order by Wilfred, null and void, in orders to restore the children with their natural parents within the next 24 hours. It, however, instructs Debika and Anirudh to ensure that their children's upbringing must align with the values of the Norwegian system. The next morning, as the parents arrive at the Wilfred's office anticipating the release of their children, they are disappointed on hearing that the court has put a stay order on the decision of the Conciliation Committee based on the testimonies of school teachers and parents of Shubh's class fellows. Against the parenting methods, Mrs. Chatterjee, the news breaks hell on the parents, and Debika, out of her inability to see her children in fear of not being able to see them ever again in her lifetime, feels crippled under such pressure and mental strain. Her sanity blurs out and she plays havoc in the office, which gets recorded to be used against her as an evidence of her being psychologically unfit to care for the children. In the ball game, another news breaks, this time that of advocate Sunil Kapoor being replaced from their case with Daniel C. Peck. The following day, in the court's hearing, the Wilfred's lawyer states that the Chatterers are incapable of providing a secure environment to their children, and provides testimonies from the school's principal and psychologists, who both deem Mrs. Chatterjee uninterested in the education of her children on the grounds of delayed submission of multiple school projects. The child psychologist goes on to reinstate how Shubh has been on autistic spectrum, and that Debika Chatterjee's lack of attention could be detrimental to his early development. Their case is further weakened when Biswa and Nandini Sarkar's complaint of domestic violence against Mr. Chatterjee is brought to the court's attention, after which the court is quick to rule that the testimonials presented by the plaintiff make it evident why an interim order was passed. The court rejects Mrs. Chatterjee's claim against the stay order. 2 months pass after the separation, and Debika, drowning in her sorrow, meets Nandini. By the end of their street, Nandini links Debika up with another woman named, who lets Debika know how her son too was taken away by the Wilfred. She helped her attain a better insight on the state of the affairs, and sheds light on how the Norwegian state lures families from underprivileged states to immigrate, and then, under charges of inadequate parenting, abducts their wards away. She emphasizes how it has been an organized crime against them, which involves the state, the kindergarten staff, the foster families, and the state-funded lawyers working for them. Debika, after the gut-wrenching disclosures, speaks to her husband, who only seems to be trying to placate her so as to prevent any hurdles from obstructing his path to citizenship. A heartbroken Debika now turns home only more estranged yet all the more determined to get her children back. She picks herself up and gathers all the courage to pack up all the essentials that she would need while she abducts the children, now the ward of the state, from their foster family and leave Norway forever. Her children alone. According to her plan, she sneaks into the household of the foster family and manages to get shopping such eye out of the house without getting notice. She gets the children into her car, slams the doors shut and drives off to the subway station, from where she drops off at Sweden, anxiously carrying both her children and the luggage all on her own. However, as soon as the authorities get to them, the children are snatched away and a baffled Mrs. Chatterjee, shattered once again, is arrested despite Mr. Kupak's efforts. The charges of abduction of the state's ward in an attempt made it crossing the international borders illegally are pressed against Debika, and a deportation case is therefore filed. Any Red, visibly frustrated with the recent chain of events stopped with Debika's ungovernable, refractory behavior, loses his composure and quarrels with his wife as they reach home. As an unruly Debika yells and calls him out for his self-centered approach towards the restoration of the custody of the kids, and his unfair obsession with pushing his citizenship again. The first Anirban slaps her across the face. Debika in retaliation hits him back and is consequently dragged to a room and locked inside as a repercussion. As the days fade into nightfall, weeks become months. Debika's anger keeps bottling up inside her and she begins to lose all hopes. Her situation with every passing hearing turns more harrowing and bleak until the day for the final hearing comes in the courtroom, this time with Mr. Kupak at his finest, accuses the Wilfred officials for not providing a trusted person for the children to communicate with, which is their legislative right. He presses on the fact that Mrs. Chatterjee is not the fool unfit to parent her children that Wilfred ought to make her. He does so by emphasizing on her academic success in education. He presents Mrs. Bere Hansen, an ex-Wilfred employee who worked as a psychologist in the court. In her testimonial, she speaks about how the children have been unable to bear separation from their parents and how the current foster family has been maltreating the children such that their personalities might soon become irreversibly seared with scars. Mr. Daniel Kupak proposes to the court that the hefty sums being paid for fosterage has been attracting the wrong kind of foster parents, which has led to the cases of child prostitution witness a significant rise in the past 3 years. The case on the verge of being won, however, slips off the hands when the previous video recordings demonstrating the turbulent conduct of Debika after her children were snatched away are played in the courtroom. The court, in the light of the evidence, rules that the children will be placed for a final adoption right away since the Chatterjee's petition gets rejected. As a sliver of hope in the dismal surroundings, Debika approaches an Indian minister, who had come to Norway to sign a treaty. Debika's dire conditions appeal to Vasudha Kamath, who pleads to demolish the treaty as a gesture of protests against the injustice. Debika's call gains momentum and a massive protest against Wilfred gets stirred up in both Norway and India. Pressure mounts upon the organization in the state of Norway as the demonstrations accelerate. Seeing the case of the Indian parents open throttle, the Norwegian and Indian government along with the representatives from Wilfred round up to conclude that the Wilfred is still not in the favor of handing over the children to Mrs. Chatterjee. However, they could only allow her to elect a foster parent for her children. Debika, who wishes to elect her parents, is told that their age would become a barrier, and therefore Anirban convinces Debika to elect his brother Anurag as the foster parent, who had secretly agreed to a deal with Wilfred to share the fosterage money that the state would provide to him in lieu of caring for the children. In the meantime, Anirban pacifies Debika with words of compassion. He holds her hands to promise her that as soon as the children would be sent to Anurag in India, he would hand them over to their mother. Debika and Anurag's election as the foster parent is their only hope to get the children out of Norway to India, where soon Debika herself would get deported. The solace she finds in the commitment of her husband leads her to signing the documents. Unaware of the secret settlements, Debika reluctantly agrees with Anirban. He is soon deported to India, where she settles down to live with her parents and joyously awaits the return of her children to India. As Shubh and Sachai are sent to live with their foster parent Anurag, an overwhelmingly excited Debika rushes to meet her children. However, she soon discovers the fraudulent settlements that Anirban along with his family had devised against her when they refused to let her meet the kids, shove the divorce documents onto her face and propel her outside the house violently. 2 years post-separation, Debika gets a chance to plead her case in the High Court of Calcutta, West Bengal, where her lawyer successfully proves that the children have been unsafe under the custody of Anurag Chatterjee, and requests that Debika Chatterjee must become the sole guardian of the children, since she is the biological mother. Just when the case seems to take this turn in Debika's favor, she notices Mr. Daniel Seeing Chapek walking towards the bench to approach the court on behalf of the government of Norway, he requests the permission to plead the case of the Norwegian government in India, since it has paid a sum of 8 million in the span of the past 14 months for the welfare of the children, to Anurag Chatterjee. As the court allows Chapek to put forth his plea, he expresses how she, being on the autistic spectrum, would be able to get the best facilities in Norway, and how the Norwegian government prioritizes the children's best interests as it would be the most suitable environment for them children to grow up into adults with the finest opportunities. He puts forth his concern that Debika Chatterjee had herself agreed to Anurag becoming the custodian, and upon reaching back India has filed a case to rob him of the guardianship. He implies that Debika had strategized to attain the welfare fosterage money from the Norwegian government. Debika's lawyer's timely intervention interrupts Chapek's case. She illuminates how Debika, despite being deserted by her husband, has fought to propel her case further since the past 2 years. She clarifies about the confidential settlement Annie Red and Henry Drag had made with the Wilfred, and finally seeks permission from the court to cross-examine Mr. Chapek, who himself had advocated for Debika to retain her children's custody back in Norway. As Mr. Daniel Sang Sepek bears witness, his words become the fulcrum about which the court's decision settles. In his testimonial, he states that as far as he has known Debika, she would never put her children's custody at stake to leech off the fosterage money in the meantime. Debika's medical certificates made in both India and Norway suggests that she is mentally capable of caring for her ward. The judge, after allowing Debika to meet the children in his chamber, experiences the sheer feeling of gratitude and contentment that radiates off the children's faces. He gets to witness the maternal affection and the natural instinct to nurture in a mother that could never be expressed in quantifiable terms. Therefore, in his ruling, he states how the decision will become a landmark in the history of global judiciary is the only one where empathy compelled the legislations to succumb to the perseverance of a mother like Debika Chatterjee, who resiliently saw forget reunited with her children in times when their unity only seemed like what could possibly have just been a mirage. Thanks for watching.